Cool. Hey, everybody. Welcome. I just thought I'll try something a little bit different, well, at least different for Lift leaders. I know there's many people doing interviews and discussions online, but I thought it would be great just to touch base with a few leaders around Europe, but obviously around the world, because I'd like to welcome Pastor Paul Geerling from iSEE Church in Australia. Thank you for joining us, Paul.
Hey, thanks for having us, Joel. It's 31 degrees here. It's autumn, fall, and it's a hot day here in Brisbane.
Yeah, I don't think I could handle those temperatures anymore. So, in a way,
all relative, mate.
In a way,
hey, the sun looks like. Look in your room. There looks like the sun's shining in Denmark today.
That's right. That's right. I've made a hole in the roof. We got to make the most of it when we get it. So, but tell us how are things going there for you in Australia amidst all of this craziness? How are you doing?
Well, I think definitely like it is in Europe. We've had a lockdown. You cannot have crowds of more than 2 people. You can only record in church with 5 people, so you can't have a full band and all that. So it's been a definite change. Like, we haven't been as negatively affected as Europe in deaths. I think we've contained the virus here more, but it's definitely changed everything about church and everything about community. There's no traffic on the roads. There's no pollution. It's schools in lockdown at the moment. It's just a very, very different time. It's an unprecedented time, but we've got to adapt to it. And just like I think all around the world, the church is adapting to it in different ways.
Yeah, I definitely think this scenario suits maybe some people better than others. I know myself, I've had to come to terms with potentially my ADD and some things like that. But I don't like working from home. That's for sure. I'm like you. I got to be doing things, and so that's been a real frustration. I try to set a routine early. If I have to work from home, that I'm going to work. So I got to do exercise this time. I got to find a new routine. I'm going to read. I'm trying to read more in this period. Doing a lot of Zoom meetings. I find that quite exhausting because it's great having the technology, but when you've got 10 people in a room around a table, it's so much easier and quicker to discussion. When you've got 10 people on Zoom, it just takes longer. It's still good, but we just got to adapt to it. But I prefer to be in the room with people. So we've got campuses across Australia and across the world. So we do a little bit on Zoom as well as we do in meetings, but it's just adapting. We've had to adapt. I'm not a great fan of, my teenagers are better technology than me. So they've taught me a lot of things. I've been doing video preaching at home and Instagram live sessions, and that's not naturally strong point of my gifting and personality, but I've had to adapt to it. And the younger people on my team have had to teach the old dog new tricks. The old dog some new tricks. I think it's kind of caught me a little bit by surprise because I thought, okay, maybe it's actually easy to work from home. It's a bit more chilled, a bit more relaxed. But I've found even just having a meeting through a screen is probably more draining than I thought because you kind of get energy by being in the room with people. And I don't know, is there anything that's probably caught you by surprise in this season as you've tried to lead the church, as best you can?
Yeah, you initially think, I have so much time, I have so much more energy, but it's actually the opposite. And so that's why I've tried to structure my week, because I've been preaching on Thursdays, pre-recorded for Sundays, but it actually takes more effort because I'm having to think very carefully about what I preach more. I'm trying to make it shorter messages. And then when I preach, I'm preaching to an empty room. It's just been a whole new experience. I find it quite draining. And then, like I said, all the Zoom meetings or the Instagram meetings, I found it very quite exhausting. And because we're all adjusting to a new normal, it definitely takes a greater emotional energy and a greater emotional toll on you, mental toll as well. So I think now we're about 4 weeks or 5 weeks into it. I think we hit a good work level. I think our productivity will go up from here. And hopefully in Australia in the next 4 weeks, they'll start bringing the lockdown down a bit. But we definitely know for the next 4 weeks, it's going to be like this.
Yeah, it's super interesting. And I think because there's only really a very limited space in which people can relate to each other, and that's online, and that's also where media and all sorts of social commentary comes from. And we just every day I guess we hear speculation and we hear different things or people's opinion about what's going to happen. But I guess the challenge for us as leaders and pastors is to tap into, what's really God saying through all of this. And I guess I wanted to ask you, amongst all of the social commentary, what is it that you think that God is doing at the moment through the church and even just through your church specifically?
Well, first, I think he's bringing it back down to what are the basics of church. So we've got a certain vision statement, a certain vision culture, but in this time, while we're in the lockdown stage, we've identified 3 areas that we're focusing on: the online content, which is Sunday services, youth content, children's content, just different things through the week, like our online connect groups through Zoom, just different things we're doing to keep our people connected and delivering church on that level, because we've got to keep the church community beyond this period for what's going to be left after it. Second is, so that's online content. Second is pastoral care. So that's probably our biggest emphasis. So you may not have a lot of meetings to do. You're not organising Sunday services. We've got 9 different campuses. So, okay, what are we doing? Caring for our volunteers and leaders, ringing through our pastoral lists and our database, because I think what's going to get people back to church at the end of this is not how good our church is, it's how much they feel loved by the church. Because people are going to develop bad habits over this time. They're not being in church. They're going to get lazy. And so we're going to have to really bring them in that connection. And the third thing is, what are we doing practically to love our community? So online content, pastoral care through small groups, through just, follow up with phone calls and FaceTime and all that kind of stuff, Zoom meetings. And then thirdly, so for us, we've had an opportunity to feed international students. It's really opened up in our city, which has given us credibility. 2 big university campuses, about 45,000 students each. And so we're partnering with those universities and providing food hampers for international uni students that are stranded here. They've got no government money. They've lost their casual jobs. They can't travel home because it's impossible to fly home. They're stuck. Wow. And so they've just got thousands of students crying out for help, and we've been able to partner with the university. So it's gaining its credibility. And then secondly, helping in opponent, and also families in need that we know in our church and outside of our church from all our campuses that we can help because they've lost jobs or they're struggling in their business, whatever it may be. They've got to come in. Got a call coming in from Hong Kong. I'm back. Sorry.
All good.
Came through on the Zoom time.
Yeah.
So that's what we've been focusing on that level. But I'm now. I think we've adapted in the last 4 or 5 weeks to surviving in those 3 areas. What are we doing to reach the community and showing outward love? How we pastorally caring for the church? What online content? Now we didn't have one bit of online content before this, and so we've gone the full whole hog. You can check it out, www.iseechurch.com or on YouTube. And so we've just gone full hog, and that's been a big adjustment, getting all the LED screen and production up to a level that's quality on that. So that was a thing. Then adjusting our pastoral care, like small groups online and Zoom, all that was a big. But now we've got that. We want to just keep churning that through. We're also using on the pastoral area, hoping to get other people. Maybe people haven't been to church for 5 years. We're ringing through all our contact lists, and we're getting people who haven't been to church for a long time get online, watch us. So hoping that, but then thirdly, reaching our community. But then on the other end, how are we going to get church going again? I'm starting to think that now. We've got our new systems going for this lockdown period. But on the other end, when they start releasing it, how are we going to get people back to church, back to youth ministry, back to children's ministry, all that kind of stuff on Sundays? I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does. It does, because I think sort of sitting on this side and pastoring in Copenhagen, one of the challenging things is to really know what to do. Because the situation is completely different. People wouldn't come to church probably if they could, but they're also really not allowed to. So as a pastor or as a church, we are first and foremost a community, and we are always looking at how do we connect with people, and it's hard to do that in the current restrictions. So I found
it's also perception. I keep saying to my staff, what's going to get people back into the building when we finish this lockdown is, do the people feel loved by our church? Yeah. Yes, we want to have a good online experience in church on Sunday, and it needs to be professional, but more than that, do they feel that there's a sense of community? Is what you were saying, and so that's really, really important. But I think online hits is not the discipleship. Pastoral care is probably the most important part I see. that's going to get people back, because that's why I've been very careful about language. Like, I haven't used church at home at all, because I don't want to put that line in my people's heads, church at home. Because, Pastor Paul, I love the fact I just walk from my lounge room, my bedroom to my lounge room and watch church. I could get used to this, having a cup of coffee. I'm not retweeting that. So that's why I was I called mine iSEE Church Together Online, because I want to say to people, this is not normal, but we're doing this especially for you. You know, connect group catch-ups on Zoom, because I want to get people back to the discipleship process, because really, church on Sunday is all not just about community. That's an important part of it. It's not just about encountering God, but it's about discipleship, being connected to a local church. And I want to make sure that at the end, I'm very careful about our language. That, this is not normal. You know, you being at home by yourself with your family watching church is good, but it's not how Christ intended it to be. You know, don't forsake coming together with the brethren, it says in Hebrews. So I really want to push that hard. So I'm starting to think that in, Joel, but how do I get people back in the building if they develop some habits that are not, you know, the flesh always overcomes the spirit unless you fight for it.
Yeah. No, that's brilliant intentionality, because clarity is always an issue in leadership. I think knowing what to do and knowing why you're doing it. And historically, the church obviously has always thrived through plagues and world wars. And there's one thing that has always been important to the church is to meet together. Like it says that the man who isolates himself rages against sound judgment, and long-term isolation is not good.
Well, I think there'll be people after lockdown, they want to get together, family, because you think Acts 2:42 says that what do the disciples keep themselves to in the early church? To communion, the breaking of bread, to prayer, to the apostles' doctrine, the teaching of the word, and to fellowship. And so that's really important. We all know that encountering God and worship is important, preaching the word is important, church. Communion is important. There's what we remember Christ's done. But then that fellowship is up there with those other three spiritual principles. The conversation before church and after church in the foyer around a coffee is just as important as church. And that's Acts 2:42. And so that's really, really important. And I think people are generally missing that. And that's something we can leverage to get back people into church when this lockdown finishes.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's fantastic. Last night I was on the phone to one of our leaders here in our campus here, he's quite an elderly man. He runs our prayer ministry. He's in his 70s, and even I was talking with him about how this really is uncharted territory for every generation, because we have lived through different things, but for him, this is something he's never seen before. And as leaders in churches, this is nothing we've ever seen before. But in some way, do you feel like you are blindsided by this, or do you feel like God has prepared you for a season like this? And if not, where do you get your wisdom from in how to lead people and pastor people through this?
I definitely felt the Lord spoke to me last year about starting an online presence, which we didn't have as a church. We've always prided ourselves in our church meetings are highly vibrant, full of spirit, full of the word, highly excellent, but we never had any online presence. So we've been preparing for this. And so it just probably accelerated that process. Look, I'm definitely talking to other leaders and watching what other churches do. But just because another church does something that's good doesn't mean it's going to work for you and your environment. And you've got to also make it work for what you've actually got, what resources you've got. So I've got friends in the country that have got small churches and small villages and country towns. They don't have the same resources that I have. But I also think, understand what some of the technology that people talk about, Zoom, Facebook, Instagram, they all have different outcomes. YouTube, TV. So YouTube is like, well, you can do a preach, you can do a full service on that. But during the week, I don't think people want to preach on Zoom. Zoom's about, I did my first staff meeting with 48 staff members on Zoom, and I preached to them, and it was terrible because it's like you preach to this matrix people. But then the second I changed the style of it, and my wife and I sat at the table, and we just had a discussion, and people brought questions back. And so different technologies lend themselves to different things. And so it's so asking young people is the best thing, because they know better than me. My teenagers know more than I did about technology, and what works for what areas. So I think that's a level. like I hear a lot of people saying this is a great opportunity for the church to get out beyond the borders. Yeah, sure, I do believe that too. Like putting stuff out on Facebook and YouTube, the gospel's going out. Look, if the Apostle Paul was here today, he'd be using Instagram, Zoom, YouTube, everything. You know, he would have had the world saved by now if he had all the technology and aeroplanes and all the things that we have. Because you think about what he did, but it's still a substitute for the basics of running church, pastoral care, discipleship, encountering God. Those things we can't substitute with technology. That's done in a community, church level, and so some things we were definitely underprepared for. I think the fact that we've been focused on our small groups for a long time has helped us in this season, because the church is being pastored not just by the pastors but by the small group leaders. I think that's been important, and I think like you said before, communication to the church is very, very important, and people getting flooded by stuff on all these social media sites. So I think it's been picking not to overdo it as well, and to keep freshening it up. So the first 2 weeks we did 14 days of prayer, and every day I put out a small devotion. It wasn't long; it was about a minute and a half, and then we moved to devotions next week. But I think that'll last about 2 weeks, and people's interest will be lost in that. We're going to have to come up with something else creative to keep people engaged on that level. It's not easy, and you know, I think you don't have to do everything. I think you just got to pick what's going to work for you in your particular church environment, or if you're a youth pastor, what's works for youth. And remember, youth and university students are far more connected on the internet than adults. And so, you know, you can probably do more things. Like our kids do Instagram Live every week for youth group, and then they do connect groups after that. They do a whole lot more stuff than the church is doing. And I think they totally follow. Like I think I'm struggling more with the isolation than my teenage son. My teenage son is in last year of high school. He does all his schoolwork in the morning. Then he gets on the computer. He's playing, you know, some kind of game with 40 other friends. They're talking all the whole time. They're not. He's not struggling with the socialization. I'm a Gen Xer, and I'm struggling because for me, connecting is not online. Connecting is going to a coffee shop and have a coffee with one of my good friends and chatting. So different age groups are thinking at different levels. So you're talking about that 70-year-old. Well, he's been through the war. He's probably been through the Depression. But the difference between the war and the Depression was the church was still allowed to gather. You know, this is the handicap we have, is that what church is a voice of encouragement, it's a voice of hope to its people, and so we were flooded in 2011, and we lost our church home, and that was a struggle for us. We had no church home for a while, and we lost a lot of people, drifted to other congregations. The difference is everybody's going through this in every church, in every city, in every nation around the world in some level. Yeah. So that's the amazing thing. That's a global phenomenon, and so a lot of, you know, we can help each other. Like we're talking in Europe, and we're talking in Australia, we're talking to friends in New Zealand and America, and asking them how they're handling it, listening to other pastors. And I've learned some things from pastors in the last couple of weeks on budgeting to pastoral care. I'm always trying to pick up and learn, because some people, if you can learn if someone else is doing something better than discovering it yourself, I don't mind adapting that as long as it works for me.
Yeah. Brilliant. What would you say is one overwhelming positive for the church in these days, if you had to pick one thing?
Well, I think people are really, because we're all going through the same crisis, there's a really good brotherly connection, as in support for one another in the body of Christ. People are laying down, you know, competition or maybe political prejudice or theological prejudice. I think there's a great, we're all in the same problem. Hey, anything I can do to help you, anything. And I think that's been a great thing for the body of Christ. I think that's been great. I think on a basic level, you can either see this as a restriction in your own personal life or an opportunity. When the Apostle Paul said, "Oh, I appeal to Caesar," from the day he appealed to Caesar till he actually met Caesar, they say it was 4 years.
Wow.
So before that, Paul had been visiting churches, planting churches, healing the sick, seeing people get saved. Now he's in jail for 18 months in Caesarea under Felix. Well, that would have been frustrating. He's not doing what he normally does. Then he gets on a ship, gets shipwrecked, gets bitten by a snake, brings revival to Malta. Then it says when he finally gets to Rome, he's in Rome for 2 years in jail before he meets Caesar. Then he gets killed. So, you know, that's he was used to preaching. He was used to teaching. He was used to discipleship. He was used to now. But you know what? He didn't see his restriction. What did he do? He wrote the epistles. And so I think we've got to adapt to, okay, God, I'm not doing what I normally do, preparing messages, preaching, doing what I normally do at church. Well, okay, in this season, that's what I've been praying myself. What do you want me to learn and grow in? So I've grown in my ability to use social media and technology because I'm not very good at that. And I'm trying to use that time to dig a new well in my time in the Word, which I normally wouldn't have. And also some time with my family. I'm stuck with my family at home. You know, it's an opportunity to do some things to build strength into my family, into my marriage.
Yeah.
And that's so I'm a bit like you. I found the first week very frustrating. But then I thought, okay, well, the Apostle Paul didn't want to be in jail, and he used his time to better himself and to do. So I'm saying, hey, God, I want to get back to my old life of being a minister and traveling around and doing all the stuff. But right now I'm stuck at home. What do you want me to do? What should I do? Well, mate, I might lose some kilos. I might spend some time having a walk with my wife.
It's definitely not happening here.
Spend some time in prayer, read some, you know, I'm trying not to see it as a restriction, but as an opportunity. Because if the Apostle Paul, if he wasn't in jail, which he didn't want to be in jail, we would not have half the New Testament.
Yeah,
that's what I think about. Yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah, and I really love that thought because a few weeks ago, actually probably the first time I had to preach online, the message I had was actually on that concept of Paul being in prison, and the message was called "Captive to Potential." You know, that we're not captive to a virus, or we're not captive.
I might steal that.
You're welcome. You've got my bank account for royalties, don't you? No. So we're not captive to the restrictions, but we're only captive to the potential in the situation, and captive to the new thing that God, or the things that God's put inside of us. That's what we're captive to, and our ability to grab a hold of them. That's our only limitation.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that God spoke to about the second or third week when I got through the frustration stage was this is an opportunity for a reset in our church. So right now, I've developed a certain calendar. I remember hearing a Brian Houston sermon to leaders about it takes you 5 or 6 years to find the rhythm of your church. And we've been on a certain rhythm. Women's event this time, miracle offering this time, Easter outreach. And you have this rhythm of the church calendar. Well, right now, our church calendar has been wiped clean. So I'm thinking, Lord, for 2021, what do you want to do? This is an open calendar. What do you want us to do? I have an opportunity to reset the whole calendar of the church.
Yeah.
What do you want me to do? And so I'm not saying I will change everything, but I'm saying it's an opportunity to bring change. And so I'm looking at a whole lot of things in the life of the church like that at the moment.
Oh, that's brilliant. And I was listening to a podcast from Mark Sayers last week, and he was likening it to a computer. It's a reboot. Sometimes you got to reboot the computer, and if you want to upgrade or update a computer, you have to reset it. You have to reboot, and in some senses, it's a little bit of a global reboot for the church, because we can come back stronger. We can take some time to reflect and to look at, well, what do we need to upgrade and strengthen? How do we adapt? So I really think
you were part of this in 2000. We got flooded, and that's what happened to us. Our church got decimated. We had 1 meter of water come through our church, but it basically was the reinvention of our church. And we had to look at everything. What were the weaknesses? What were the strengths? And I think you're right. We're going to come out of this, but we're not going to go back to the same. The world's going to look different, just like after 9/11, the world looked different. Security, plane travel. Well, after this COVID-19, the world's not going to go exactly back the same. So we're going to have to look at the church. We're not going to go back to the same. We got to improve ourselves, and I think we'll be leaner. We might be more efficient. We'll realise who's really important on staff and what key positions or roles we want to put our resources into. All those conversations are happening behind the scenes at every church at the moment. Yeah. What does it look like in 2021? Yeah.
Well, there's definitely some positives, huge positives to come out of this.
It's an advantage. It's an advantage for us to go forward, I think. We got to look at it like that way, like you said before. Yeah. It's an opportunity for a reboot.
It's good. Very good. Well, finally, lastly, any final tips for leaders, young leaders out there at the moment who might be watching?
I would say personal development. I would say, the deeper the well you dig, the further you're going to go up. Like if you, in Australia, this place called the Gold Coast, there's a lot of big skyscrapers by the ocean. Sometimes they're 60, 70 stories high. Well, the deeper the foundation, the higher that tower is going to go. If you build a 4-story building, hey, that needs a small foundation. You want to do a 70-story building, it's got to have a deep foundation. And I think sometimes, God, especially as young leaders, we're busy doing things, creating work. But if God's making you sit still, don't waste it on the PlayStation 4
Phenomenal.
Get into the Word.
Mm.
Dig a new well. Unblock an old well. Develop
Mm.
your prayer time. Just praying in the Spirit. Get into the Word more, and use that to get a reservoir within you, so that when the handbrake's taken off, you've got more in your tank for the next season ahead. I think that's what we can do. It's like, a camel goes through the desert, it uses all its fat cells up, and then it's got to it's got to drink a whole lot of water. It's got to build up its hump again through eating and resourcing itself. That's what we look at, because we're going to be out there in the battlefield again. And we need to use it as an advantage to build as a young leader into your life spiritually. And that could be podcasts. It could be read the Word. It could be prayer. It could be talking to other leaders who you actually will get online, because a lot of leaders are stuck at home. They're not traveling anywhere. And it's amazing, you might be able to connect with people and talk to them on Zoom. Give me 10 minutes of your time if I ask you some questions.
Yeah, exactly like we're doing right now. Well, thank you so much for your time. That was phenomenal. And I know
great to talk to you, Joel.
I get loads out of that, and I hope whoever's watching this has taken some notes and can apply it and use it. It's great. Thanks so much. I know you're very busy, so I'll let you get back to sweltering in that hot Brisbane sun, and hopefully we get to chat again soon.
Yeah, thanks, guys, and good luck to all the lift leaders out there. It's going to be a good season ahead.
Amen. Thanks, Paul.
God bless. Bye.